We welcome you to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. Good morning, Jamey. You ready for week 7?
Yes, sir.
All right, Thursday Night Football. We got our start of the week tonight. Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Heath, you ready for week 7?
It's so exciting to look at the standings and see like 75% of the league is between 2-4 and 4-2 in so many of my leagues. And it's kind of like the season starts now. It's exciting.
I thought you were talking about the NFL.
No.
Okay. Any undefeated teams, Heath? I know Jamey has one.
I do not. Had the podcast league lost last week because I lost Puka.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. By the way, me, Dave, Jamey, Heath, we're all like top 5 in scoring in the podcast league. Bring it. Let's get to some players that we love. Jamey, Jaylen Warren. Talked about him yesterday. Jared Goff and Jameson Williams Monday night against Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, Warren is in a great spot, obviously taking on the Bengals. We'll see how this goes tonight. I'm always hesitant to use the start of the week on Thursday, but we'll see how it goes. But 8 running backs have scored at least 14.1 PPR points against the Bengals. Cincinnati allowed 10 total touchdowns to the position. So Warren has it's funny. You talked about this before the year that Warren, I forget how many catches he had without catching a touchdown. He did that in week 1. He's yet to score a rushing touchdown this year. So we'll see if he can snap that streak and finally find the end zone. But I think it's worth, using Kenneth Gainwell as a flex as well, as Heath talked about on Tuesday or some point, maybe yesterday. I think we talked about on Tuesday and Wednesday. They've had, 8 running backs have been at 14.1 PPR points or more. 9 running backs have been in 11.5 PPR points or more against the Bengals. So they've actually had 3 teams where 2 running backs have been at 11.5 PPR points or more. So I think Gainwell could be a flex. He's been at 9.5 PPR points in 2 of his last 3 games, the third one being the breakout game against Minnesota. For the 2 Lions guys, this is the setup we love for these 2. Being at home in what should be a high-scoring affair. Goff, give him credit. His last 2 games on the road, he's been over 20 fantasy points. Tampa Bay obviously has been struggling a little bit in terms of their pass defense. I know they turned over Mac Jones twice last week, but they've given up over 300 yards passing each of their last 2 games. So Goff should have an opportunity for a big week in this matchup. And then Jameson Williams, I love the fact that he had a season high in targets last week. Finally looked like they're starting to get him going a little bit. And again, just based on the matchup and the opportunity, this should be one of the better games for Jameson Williams if the script follows as plans. And he's typically been better at home than on the road as well. So I like the setup for both of the Lions against Tampa Bay.
I'm going to give a stat that it's probably just very small sample size and doesn't matter, but it's going to make us feel better about Goff. We already feel good about Jared Goff. So you look at the implied total for the Buccaneers in this game, it's around 23 points. So I looked at how does Jared Goff do at home last year, because it hasn't happened yet this year, when the Lions give up 23 or more points. There were 3 instances. He scored 31 points, 28 points, and 51 points in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. So if the Bucs do their part, Jared Goff should do his part.
He is averaging over 30 points per game at home. It's a little skewed because he had the huge game against the Bears and the crappy game against the Browns.
But he has that the crazy high upside at home. It's exciting. All right, Heath, you love Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt at Dallas, Kamani Vidal against the Colts, and Chris Olave at Chicago.
Yeah, I think everybody was probably planning on starting Bill. He's been kind of a low-end RB2 for us most weeks. I've got him ranked as a high-end RB2 this week. One of the best rushers in the NFL, averaging 5.7 yards per carry on an efficiency basis. The Cowboys' run defense is awful, and this game has an over-under of 54.5. You would like to start as the highest one of the year so far. You would like to start as many Commanders and Cowboys as possible. Kamani Vidal, I don't think you should expect another Dolphins outburst, although it looks like I am quite a bit higher on him than Dave and Jamey. But the thing that I love is the fact that he had a 67% rush share in that game, 21 total touches, and it was not close who looked better between Vidal and Haskins. There should be no doubt he's the clear number 1 running back and a starter on your fantasy team this week. And number 3 is Chris Olave, who's averaging over 10 targets per game. The Bears are giving up over 2 fantasy points per target to opposing wide receivers. That math suggests boom week for Chris Olave.
All right, good stuff. Players to avoid. We'll go right back to Heath here. Chase Brown tonight. Tony Pollard against New England. And Darren Waller against Cleveland.
So I think two of these people are like, yeah, I'd like to get away from them, but I don't know if they can. They're workhorse running backs. How do you sit workhorse running backs? Chase Brown and Tony Pollard don't look like workhorse running backs anymore. Tyjae Spears actually played more than Pollard and was better than Pollard last week. And I think that might be like a game script thing where Spears is just in more when they're chasing the score. Guess what? They're the Titans. They're going to be chasing the score a lot. Chase Brown has seen his snap share, which was his best attribute last year as a player, fall to 55% in 3 of his last 4 games. Samaje Perine just continues to get more work. You do not want to start Chase Brown. And Darren Waller, this is probably the most controversial of the takes. You see Dave and Jamey both have him at 7th. You look at the Browns against tight ends, and it's like, oh, they're just middle of the pack. This is the one position that you can start against them. Jonnu Smith, just starting tight ends. Jonnu Smith, 4.8 points. TJ Hawkinson, 9.4. Sam Laporta, 6.9. Tucker Kraft, 5.9. Mark Andrews, 1.2. They've given up a bunch of points against tight ends. Not a bunch, a league average amount. Because Noah Fant, John Fitzpatrick, Josh Oliver, and Connor Hayward all scored touchdowns against them. The only tight end with more than 40 receiving yards against this defense, Darnell Washington. Maybe start Julian Hill.
Well, we need to bring this up with Waller. He's really not a tight end. He's lined up out wide on 44% of his routes. The next highest tight end is at 25%, right about. Right. So Waller's not going to be covered like a typical tight end. I don't know if that changes anything for you. He also has the highest ADOT of all tight ends who have like 10 or more targets. He only has 12 targets. I had to lower the threshold there, but he's just he's a different player. He's basically their wide receiver too. I don't know if that means anything. Like for example, Derwin James was not covering Darren Waller last week. On a handful of occasions he was. So he's just different.
Well, wide receiver twos haven't been good against the Browns either.
Yeah, that's true. All right. And for Jamey, it's Matthew Stafford in London at Jacksonville, Ken Walker against Houston Monday, and Tedero McMillan putting some sauce on him.
So Stafford, obviously having Devontae Adams is a big difference, but you go back to last year in the 5 games that he did not have Puka Nacua, he scored 14.8 fantasy points or less in each outing. So don't love the setup without Puka here. Struggled last week, obviously, when Puka left the field. And so we don't expect Puka to play. I know Jacksonville's defense has been obviously hit or miss in terms of quarterbacks, but I'm going to try to avoid Stafford if I can. In the case of McMillan, you mentioned it. Now, this is interesting because a lot of receivers have obviously faced Sauce Gardner already and done okay. For the most part, they've scored around 12 or more PPR points, but it's been somewhat touchdown related. Pickens needed a touchdown, for example, to help his day against Sauce. It's just one of those things where I think you just lower expectations. I probably have him a little bit too low by comparison to everybody else, but we've seen what he has been for the most part. He's got one game where he scored a touchdown. It was last week. He has one game over 13 PPR points prior to that. And I think we're going to see maybe in that 11 to 12 range at best. If Sauce follows him as probably expected, we'll see if Jalen Coker plays as well. Maybe a second option there in the field. With Ken Walker, we've heard plenty of reports already that they're not going to change how they use their running back rotation. Houston's run defense is obviously very good. So for Walker, it's a flex option at best. I would prefer to sit him if I can.
Let's stay on Tedero McMillan here. This is the last game that I have scheduled for us to talk about today, Carolina at the Jets, which means we'll get to it in about 2.5 hours. Yeah, you did mention there are a lot of wide receivers getting the 12 fantasy point range against the Jets, the ones that get shadowed by.
There's only one that did not, which was Sutton.
Sutton, yeah. So you're talking about DK Metcalf, Mike Evans, who actually caught his touchdown on a different cornerback, not Gardner. Tyreek Hill, 6 catches, 67 yards. George Pickens had the deep touchdown. He only had 4 targets. The thing is, like, McMillan just hasn't been good this year, really. I mean, he's been okay. He scored more than 13.3 fantasy points in one game. It was last week against the best matchup in fantasy where he had 29 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, I don't know. You said you might be too low on him. You have him 30th. If I were ranking, I'd be with you. Dave and Heath have him like 20th, which isn't a huge endorsement this week because wide receiver's so bad. But yeah, Heath, go ahead. Your thoughts on McMillan?
I think when we say he hasn't been good this year, we should say he hasn't produced great fantasy production.
Right, sure. Good
because when you shared that graphic yesterday about wide receivers and the predictivity of first downs and first downs per route run, it was a Tedero McMillan tweet.
I actually did not share it on this show. I just shared it with you, so people might not.
I was like,
we never got to it.
We never got to it. I thought you said we were going to put it on the show. We didn't put it on the show.
I did.
First downs and first downs per route run are very predictive of future fantasy success. Tedero McMillan's been a top 10 wide receiver in those categories. He has been very good. He hasn't produced a lot of fantasy points. But if he was playing a regular matchup, he'd be a top 12 wide receiver for me. So I have downgraded him down to wide receiver 20. I think that the history of Sauce Gardner so far suggests guys are going to be a little bit worse than they have been this year. So maybe he will be a little bit worse, but if he's a little bit worse in terms of the way he's played, it's just, does he score a touchdown or not? And there aren't 20 wide receivers that I feel great about this week.